that thing, and they actually say the truth.
Can you give us their names? A couple of them. Michael, I'm going to hold you to give us one name.
No.
Give us one name.
Follow me on Twitter. I mean, you can look at all the people. I follow about 600 people on Twitter.
Okay, so then follow the people you're following. Hey.
There are honest analysts, and there are people that are domain experts, and they publish their unadulterated thoughts. And if you actually put together a mosaic of all those things with your own real-world experience, you'll start to synthesize a view of reality, which is, I think, probably more reliable than any one, edited traditional media source.
Somebody just gave a $500 super chat and asked this question. Said, have more people been hacked owning Bitcoin than banks have failed?
Bitcoin's never been hacked.
This is John Coaster.
Bitcoin's never been hacked. So the only people that suffer with Bitcoin are people that trust their Bitcoin to the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world. If you put your Bitcoin in Celsius or BlockFi or FTX, if you put it in a wildcat bank and the bank steals your money, right? The real message of Bitcoiners is don't trust, verify, and be your own bank, and not your keys, not your coins. So the message of Bitcoin is you can't trust anybody. If I actually told you the world is made up of imperfect people, and let's say there's 100 families and we all have money and none of us trust each other, and we all know we have idiot kids that are going to take over the family business in time, and we want to create a community bank where we can collectively put our money, the answer would be, well, you don't put anybody in charge of it. You don't put any one family in charge of it. You might be the smartest amongst us, and your son's going to have an idiot
Not me, Michael.
son,
no.
and eventually 3 generations down the road, it's not going to work anymore. So you write a piece of software. Everybody checks the software. We all agree the software is honest. We put the software on a computer. Nobody trusts your computer. We create 100 computers. Everybody runs their own computer with the software. We all agree collectively not to change the software. And anybody that tries to change the software gets kicked out of the network. That's what Bitcoin is. It's an honest approach to solve a problem when you can't rely on a person, you can't rely on a family, you can't rely on an institution, you can't rely on a government. What we rely on is the collective self-interest of rational people over time with regard to that one thing. And it really is a beautiful invention.
How monumental will the Bitcoin halving be? I think it's expected in April of 2024, so in a little less than a year. How big of a deal is that?
I think it's a catalyst to the upside. Clearly, I mean, the amount of Bitcoin that the miners receive in a reward that they might sell will be cut in half. So that's a good thing. But I would say that any rational person that studied Bitcoin for 10 hours knows that there will never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And so there's less than that because some millions of Bitcoin have been lost and they'll never be spent. And so you're buying Bitcoin because you know it's capped. And you know that gold and silver and oil and soybeans and paper currency and land and apartments are not capped. Everything else on earth is going to keep increasing in supply forever. Bitcoin is not. So once you figure that out, then the only question is there anything better? And you sift through the other 20,000 cryptos. And if they're not better and they're not better, then this is the one. Now, every intelligent person with money has put their money on Bitcoin. So what are you going to bet on? You're going to bet on the networks that were invested in by people without money that aren't intelligent, right? So Bitcoin is the winner because the smart money has chosen it. There are a lot of other catalysts, right? Every time there's hyperinflation in a place like Argentina, it's a catalyst. Every time a bank fails, it's a catalyst. Every time someone builds an application that's cool on Bitcoin, right? Like all the ordinals and inscriptions and whatever, they're driving up transaction fees, it's a catalyst. Every time a company like MicroStrategy buys another $100 million worth of Bitcoin, it's a catalyst. Every time a regulator actually clarifies the fact that Bitcoin is a commodity, an asset without an issuer, and it's special, that's a catalyst. So lots of catalysts, they're all going to continue. The result will be Bitcoin will chop its way up with volatility forever. Just going to keep grinding up. Because for you to believe Bitcoin's going to grind up, all you got to believe is that human beings have a natural tendency to want to improve their life and protect their property and benefit their friends and family.
Somebody gave $2 billion Zimbabwe dollars super chat. It's actually 540.
2 nickels.
It's actually $540 that they gave. Michael,
There you go.
Can you give us your take on ordinals? TXN fees on Bitcoin or BTC are currently higher than any point in the last 3 years, and we are seeing use cases like NFTs on BTC main chain. Will this shift developers from Ethereum to Bitcoin? Is Saylor pro or anti-ordinal? This is from an Assyrian brother, Ninos and Ninor. So what are your thoughts on this?
My boys, Ninos.
Okay, so Saylor is pro-freedom and pro-markets. And Saylor he's an Austrian economist, so all value is subjective. So here's what I think. I think everybody should be able to launch whatever business they want to launch. And I think everybody should be able to pursue their happiness however they want. And I think that lots of people will create lots of things that won't work. So I'm not going to give you a recommendation of stocks, because some businesses will work, some won't, and some stocks you will buy too high and some you will not, and I don't want to be on the hook for 10,000 stocks. I'm not going to tell you how to gamble, but I'm not going to tell you not to. I'm not going to give you a recommendation for a private business. You want to collect art? I'm not going to tell you not to. I'm just not going to tell you which piece of art to buy to make money. I don't know which thing is going to work, and I know that over time, all fiat currencies will fail, and over time, I believe most businesses, in fact, all businesses will not be as good as investing in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the low-risk asset. I do think that what happened over the past 5 months is pretty interesting. If you go to New Year's Eve, the average fee on the Bitcoin blockchain was like 3 sats per V-byte. I mean, there were blocks every 10 minutes that had $600 of transaction fees in them, right? And so the miners were getting a reward of $100,000 with $600 or $300 of fees. So the fees were 1% of the reward. Yeah. They were nothing, de minimis. And what happened over 5 months is Bitcoin had a massive rally. All of a sudden, the miners were getting $150,000 or $200,000 reward. But then we saw fees, transaction fees that got to more than 6 Bitcoin, which was $180,000 in fees. So we went from $1,000 in fees to $100,000 in fees, a factor of 100 increase. And the fees started to approach parity with the reward. If you're an investor in Bitcoin mining, if you're a Bitcoin miner and you want a bullish thesis, in order to have a bullish thesis, you want to see that fees, transaction fees, are at parity with the rewards. And you want to have a belief that transaction fees will increase at a rate faster than the hash rate. So if the hash rate's going up 20% a year and transaction fees are going up 30% a year, then that's a good business, a really good business. And so in a world where transaction fees are 1%, they're irrelevant. You don't have parity, and then the growth rate doesn't matter. And then all you see is the rewards are decreasing 18% a year, and that's a bearish scenario. So I think that what happened with ordinals and NFTs is we crossed this chasm from what was a bearish scenario to a bullish scenario. If I was a miner, I would be ecstatic. I think that long term, there are a lot of implications. Long term, the implication is there's going to be a lot of applications on the Bitcoin base layer. If I can inscribe a piece of art, right, an NFT is kind of an art, but I could also inscribe my last will and testament. And if my last will and testament is moving $1 billion from me to you, how much is it worth to you to have that burned onto the blockchain and cryptographically verified?
Yeah, at least $1 billion for me, Michael.
Would you pay $20?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Would you pay $100?
Of course.
There you go. So there are interesting applications. If I have a corporate resolution to make $1 billion investment and I DocuSign it, and I'm worried about getting sued for hundreds of millions of dollars in the future. Would I pay $100 to burn that on the blockchain? Maybe, probably. If I have a message I want to send around the world and I don't want a hostile nation state to interfere with that message, is that worth $20 or $50? Sure it is. So what people are realizing is that transactions on the blockchain, they are the ability to send a message that a nation state can't stop. Their ability to put a document on a network for 100 years that no one can actually tamper, an immutable blockchain. I mean, if I can store $1 billion for 100 years, that's valuable. But you know, if you wanted to move $10 million of oil from New York to London, it would cost you about $350,000. So what if I want to move $10 million of Bitcoin from New York to London? What if I want to move $10 million worth of a document of something of, if you wanted to sell a $10 million work of art, that's $500,000 to $1 million or more in auction fees. Mm-hmm. So people have thought, well, transactions, man, there's no future for them. But I actually am of the opinion that transactions at $1 or $2 a transaction, they're very undervalued. This is the most valuable, most tamper-proof, immutable, secure transaction network in the world. If I gave you $100 billion and I said attack the network, you couldn't do it. If you were a nation with $100 billion and 4 years, you could slow it down, but you couldn't stop it. So I think that the real significance of ordinals and NFTs and inscriptions is people used to take the transactions for granted, and they undervalued the Bitcoin mining network. And now I think what you have is a lot of speculation, and you also have a migration of crypto development energy from the other cryptos to Bitcoin. That's a good thing, I think. It's inevitable because Bitcoin is the low-risk crypto network and the high-security crypto network. So you're going to see speculation move. You're going to see development move. But long-term, what's really significant here is that people are going to see Bitcoin as the most secure cyber network or the most secure computer network in the world. And if I told you I'm going to burn a document and I want it to stay immutable for 100 years, and I don't want any hostile corporation or nation state or actor to be able to tamper with it or stop it, and in 100 years I want to prove that that's my document. You know, Satoshi could sign a digital document. He could sign a message today and prove that he owns $30 billion of Bitcoin, and he could do it in a split second. That's the power of the Bitcoin network, and that has been under-realized. It's underestimated. So I think that what's going to go right now is it's going to be a lot of excitement, but ultimately the ethically sound, technically sound, economically sound future is for people to realize that Bitcoin is this immutable, incorruptible, non-sovereign computer network, and it's going to protect your money, but it's also going to protect your integrity, and people are going to pay money for truth on that network, and that's what's going to finance those miners. And when you look at all those miners running in Texas, you're saying, what are they doing? They're protecting the integrity of Western civilization, they're protecting the integrity of the human race for the next 1,000 years.
Michael,
that's worth something.
That's powerful. We got 5 minutes, and I want to go through two things with you. One, you said Satoshi. How often do you guys text each other? Are you guys in communication regularly, or is he?
I think about Satoshi every day.
Really?
Does he think about you? Is there like a direct line of communication? Because you're becoming gradually the Billy Graham of Bitcoin. You went from a non-believer to a believer.
It was a one-way gift. The reason that Bitcoin is ethical is Satoshi made a one-way gift to the human race, asking nothing in return, and that is an extraordinary
So
thing.
as a guy that you said you hired 30,000 employees, 2,000 are still with you. You've been operating for 30 years, okay? You've been a billionaire for a minute. You were a billionaire in the late 90s, and you've been in that talks. For you, it's probably not a big deal because you've been that for a while. But to the average person to see that category where there's only 700 to 900 of you in America, it's a pretty big deal to get to a place like that. There's a guy right now that could be potentially looking for another job, and he was being interviewed on MSNBC by this lady named Stephanie Rule. And he was asked the question, I'm curious to know if you would hire somebody like this. This is a phenomenal question here.
There's not a Fortune 500 company in the world looking to hire a CEO in his 80s. So why would an 82-year-old Joe Biden be the right person for the most important job in the world?
Because I've acquired a hell of a lot of wisdom. I know more than the vast majority of people. I'm more experienced than anybody's ever run for the office. And I think I've proven myself to be honorable as well as also effective.
Would you hire somebody like that to run a, I don't know, like a $4 or $5 trillion a year company, whatever the number is, $32 trillion company, give or take? I could be off on the GDP. You think that would be a good CEO for a company that size?
Now you're asking me a question that's somewhat above my pay grade. I think that.
Wait. You're a voter.
Tom, let's see what he's got to say.
I think that the number one criteria to run an organization, is humility combined with a bit of wisdom from life experience, but combined with an extraordinary amount of energy. You have to eat, sleep, and breathe the thing. And I think that organizations that have people with too much confidence, they tend to go off the rails. And so it's good to know what you don't know.
Got it. So to understand what you meant, we have to speak sign language. So he left it to you guys. You decide what our friend here meant by that. But just for your own company, if you were getting to a point where you would be replacing yourself as a CEO, would you look at somebody and value a person with, who's 82 years old wanting to be the CEO of MicroStrategy, or would you look for somebody younger? Or would it even matter to you age-wise?
Well, I did have the opportunity to replace myself last year, and I'm the executive chairman, and we appointed a new CEO, and the CEO is Fong Lee, and he's
in his 90s?
He's in his 40s.
Oh, okay, he's in his 40s. Early
40s.
So you weren't going on like seniorceos.com and looking for recruiters to find that's not even seniors, right? Because baby boomers, 1946 to 64.
So you weren't interested in experience?
I'm not going to say the perfect age to be CEO because there are a lot of examples. I myself appointed myself CEO at age 24, but then again, I was only responsible for myself, and I couldn't mess much up.
That's different, though.
Because I inherited, and it took me many, many years to get to the point where I could break something. I think that the bigger the organization, the more careful one needs to be.
This is a pretty big organization we're talking about, and this guy's applying for that job.
300 million.
Anyways, so Michael, every time you come, by the time you're done talking, my brain feels like has had a 4-hour workout, even though it was only 90 minutes today. Because you make me think, and I love the way you explain, and you're always gathering information from different places, and the audience loves this. So this is, I think you're one of only 3 or 4 names that we've had on 3 times. So if you've never felt like, maybe if you recently have not been getting enough love, we just want to make sure we love Michael Saylor, the Billy Graham of Bitcoin. That's going to be the new nickname, by the way.
The evangelist.
The evangelist, the Billy Graham of Bitcoin, baptizing folks in Bitcoin around the world.
Okay, if you don't remember anything else I said today, just remember Bitcoin is hope. And go to hope.com. That's where all the information is.
Really?
Bitcoin, good. Laser eyes.
Bitcoin, good.
You can boil it all down to that. Everything else is complicated.
And big week next week. The Miami Bitcoin conference is going to be here.
15,000 cyber hornets coming to Miami.
They'll all be right here.
It's going to be awesome.
You're going to baptize all of them and name them Satoshi, Bitcoin, and what would be the third? There's got to be the technology, right? Anyways, Michael, once again, thank you. Gang, all the stuff is below. Links, Rob, let's put it there. for people to be able to find Michael. I asked him a question earlier about Michael. Who do you follow on social? What you read their articles? If you go follow his Twitter account, you'll be able to know who he follows, and that's where you'll see where he gets his intel from. Okay, maybe that's one way to find out where who those 590 people are